So this book right here was outstanding. It had three stories, three separate stories, all in one book. And when it connects, and you can read one book and it goes right to the next and then it goes right to the next, it's the most amazing journey ever. Of course, it's another Montana series. This is Montana Mavericks with three brand new stories under the western skies. The authors are Laurie, Paige, Linda Turner, and Allison, Leigh. Montana, big sky country, the place where legendary love is dramatically revealed. Now a new chapter begins as the town of Rumor gives birth to more exciting tales, the continuation of the Montana Mavericks saga. Best-selling authors Laurie Paige, Linda Turner, and Allison, Leigh present three brand new stories full of original, fascinating characters in a town that is certain to create its own awe-inspiring legends. When the fun-loving town of Rumor throws a crazy moon festival celebrating the lunar eclipse, there's no telling what will happen. Stop in at the Calico Diner where three sassy waitresses discover the truth behind local legend. If you meet a man under the crazy moon, you're sure to be a bride soon. Now, like I said, there's three stories in here. The first story up is by author Laurie Paige, and it's One Baby to Go, Please. And it is a great story. And I'm only going to share the last page with you here because they do get a little bit deep and more romantic. But hey, Yellowstone has nothing on this story, let me tell you. Okay, we're going to go right here where the worst thing that would be never meeting you, he added, and I can handle anything else. Looking into his eyes, she knew they both could. Life would be hard. It was unpredictable. It could also be wonderful. You've got to read that story, and that's what I'm going to leave you with on that one. We're going to go to the next paperclip, and if you haven't noticed, the endings is what I'm giving you because I want you to read the meat in the story. It's called Marriage on the Menu by Linda Turner. Okay. He's asking her if she will marry him. So, will you marry me, Callie? He asked her before, but never like this. He asked her 3 times in the story, and 3 times he almost messed it up. Her hand was trembling in his. She stared down at him and caught her breath as her eyes met his. He did love her. He didn't say the words, but she had mistaken the love she saw shining in his eyes. Suddenly her heart was pounding with hope. Was this for real? Did he really love her? Was it possible? Desperate to hear the words, determined that there would be no misunderstandings between them, she only had one question for him. It was the same she asked every time he proposed. Why? Because I love you with all my heart, he said honestly. That was the only answer she ever wanted to hear. Smiling through the tears that streamed down her face, she tightened her fingers around his and pulled him to his feet. Yes, I will. Because I love you too. Her family and friends were crying and clapping, but she had only eyes for Nick. There was something else you need to know, she said in a quiet voice that carried only to his ears. You were right. She didn't have to say what he was right about. He knew. She saw the joy flare in his eyes and knew that later they would both have joy in each other's arms and talk about the future and their baby. For now, though he grinned and opened his arms, everything that needed to be said had been said. Without another word, she stepped into his arms. I'm telling you, these men in Montana, I don't know what water they drink, but could we please get some of that water to Illinois to some of these men? Because honestly, I don't think they have a romantic bone in their body. So we're moving on. The last story is Daddy Takes the Cake by Allison, Leigh. And there's 2 adorable little kids in this story that helps bring these 2 together. And you've just got to read this story. Okay. I know, Libby nodded. Her gaze was moving toward the head of the aisle where the minister and the grooms had taken their place in front of the guests. Her heart clenched and clutched as she looked at Marcus. His dark hair gleamed beneath the bright moonlight and the soft lights that had been placed around the field to help illuminate the ceremony. He wore the classically tailored tuxedo as if he'd been born to do it. Callie, do you think all of this is just because of that crazy moon? Callie's smile was slow. All of this is because of crazy love. Then she turned and faced the aisle. The notes of the processional dripped with crystal clear purity from a string quartet. With her hand on her father's arm, she headed slowly, confidently, her long white gown trailing beautifully behind her, along the aisle to meet her future with Nick, a man she loved for far too so long, who'd finally figured out that he loved her too. Mom, is my tie straight? Marcus said as he got the tea to make sure my tie was straight before we got married. Your tie is perfect, Libby answered Bobby, and the flowers in your hair are perfect too, she added for Patty. Callie had joined Nick before the minister, and it was Libby's turn. Her heart was madly racing. She moved to the place where Bobby was on her one side and Patty was on the other. That's the two kids by Libby. Marcus had wanted her children to be part of their wedding ceremony, and so had Libby. They all were getting married, just like Bobby had said. But still, she felt positively weak and nervous, and her parents had flown in from Boston to attend the wedding, and they were sitting in the front row. Even her father hadn't been able to look down his nose at Marcus because Marcus had quite simply been himself when they met the previous day at the Billings airport. Marcus was just being Marcus, which was a pretty impressive person. Looking up the aisle, Libby watched Marcus move toward the center, waiting for her and for them. Her nervousness subsided and peace flooded through her. She stepped forward with her children beside her, but they were impatient, anxious to get on with the marrying. Their pace sped up until they were practically running up the aisle to Marcus. The guests murmured, even chuckled indulgently, though she didn't have a moment where she felt like she was impatient as her children. Libby followed behind rather more sedately. Marcus held out his hand when she neared, and she took it, the loving feel of his warm fingers closing around hers. The twins, fairly wriggling with excitement, stood on the other side of her, and the whole lot of them faced the minister, who began speaking with a welcome for all guests. You didn't run up the aisle like the twins, Marcus murmured for her ears only. I wanted to, she admitted. Only I was afraid I'd trip because of my high heels, and my parents would probably die of mortification if I married you with grass stains marring my dress. His eyes crinkled. A deep, sexy slash appeared along his cheek. When he smiled, Libby's heart simply turned over. I love you, Marcus Jessup, she said softly. I love you too. His fingers tangled with hers, and whether or not it was untimely, he lifted their linked hands and kissed her knuckles. When the minister eventually turned to them, it was their turn to exchange their vows, and Marcus's voice was steady and sure. Libby's voice trembled, yet with conviction. The guests to one side with happiness, and the bridal couple shared their first kiss as husband and wives. Libby and Marcus, so thoroughly wrapped in each other's arms at that moment, never saw the look the twins gave each other. They never heard what the guests said in the front row as Patty and Bobby leaned over toward each other, exchanging high fives. Did you think a poster would work to get us a baby brother or sister too? And to find out why they made that poster about wanting a daddy and why they'd want that poster now, you have to read the book. You have to read all 3 stories. This amazing book by these 3 outstanding authors gets a 100 as well. And I'm going to be placing this book and the other book that I reviewed in a bag to go up to the Candy Kitchen so that hopefully somebody else can get just as much joy out of these 2 books. So with that being said, I've got some magazines to review with you next. And no, it's not the magazines that we missed out on. But I've counted. This is number 3 new video. I like to do things in an even number. So sit there, stay tuned, don't go anywhere.